So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. As mentioned in previous sessions, it's so great to see so many people from across the country here. And I know Danielle just got us all to rate our sports, so it's so great to see such a variety of coaches from different sports here on our call this afternoon. So this coach socialization series was started at the beginning of isolation in Nova Scotia. So that was approximately, I think we're on day 61 or 62 here in Nova Scotia. So this is, I think, our 8th week of having these sessions. So we've had a variety of topics come on to talk about a variety, presenters come on to talk about a variety of topics. And today we have Danielle with us from Canadian Sports Centre Atlantic, who is a mental performance consultant, and she'll be talking to us about visualization. So this was a topic that was requested by a few coaches just to learn about the basics and how they can implement this into their practice as a coach. So if you do have any questions, stick to the chat box until we open it up for open discussion. But for now, I'll let Danielle take it away to talk about visualization.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty, and thanks to Kirsty who got this up and going back and like so quick to get it going in the first place. So we're lucky to have such a quick thinker and someone that made it happen. And we're gaining a lot of speed, and it's so nice to see so many coaches from across Canada join us out on the East Coast. So by popular demand, we're talking about visualization today. Kirsty had sent out a questionnaire back a while ago to ask what coaches wanted to hear about, and visualization was up there, and I think maybe in the top 5 as far as sports psych and mental performance and mental skills go. Just to give a bit of background, I've been doing mental performance for about 15 years, but before that, and while doing that, I was also a level 3 NCCP coach in artistic swimming, which previously known as synchronized swimming. And I had about 25 years in coaching in synchro, both here in Canada and overseas. So a lot of these skills I've used as an athlete, I've used as a coach, and obviously I use in working with athletes now as a mental performance consultant. So for all intensive purposes, today we're talking about visualization, but some of you may know it as guided imagery, mental rehearsal. It goes by several different names, but basically they're talking about the same thing. And what we're talking about really here is creating and or recreating images in our mind of what we want to happen or feel in reality. So with that, just curious, as coaches or as athletes or even as a person dealing with this particular situation, what practices do you have? What are your practices around visualization that you'd like to share? So opening that up to everybody to share either in the chat or verbally.
Hi, Christy and then as a coach for table tennis, what I do basically before our session is happening or there's a big tournament coming, so I take my athletes to the club and let them visualize how the images of tables are, how the lightning will be, how much practice you need to do, and imagine how many people will be around you. So there will be a lot of cheering, boos, everything, right? So that's what I do with them. At least like before the session starts, half an hour before, or 45 minutes before, I take them there and let them visualize everything before the session starts.
Okay, thank you, Mohit.
Yeah.
Good, and I see here mind runs and visuals. So I'm guessing that's athletics, maybe. Charles, mirror shooting without a ball, great. Visualize scenarios and fixes, awesome. And skeleton, okay. Oh, okay, you're saying what sport you're involved in, gotcha. Okay, videos of pros and split screen, gotcha. All right. So probably people are using this, and try to get the athletes to see themselves, either they're doing the routine like they are on the equipment or like they are watching themselves on video. Yeah, video definitely, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well today in the use of video when trying to kind of work towards visualization. Okay, so why is visualization important? Hold on. Okay, there. So what our mind sees affects our bodies. And one of the classic things I was taught when I first started doing mental skills was just the simple example of how our mind affects our body. So I want everybody right now to just close their eyes. And you don't need to imagine you're in your house because you're in your house. But imagine that you're in your kitchen and you have a lovely ripe lemon sitting on your countertop. And I want you to consider taking out a knife and a cutting board, and I want you to slowly cut that lemon in half. And as you cut that lemon in half, I want you to smell how fragrant the lemon is. I want you to take half of that lemon. I want you to look at the seeds. I want you to feel the weight of the lemon. I want you to hold up that lemon to your mouth, and I want you to slowly squeeze all that sour lemon juice into your mouth. And I really want you to taste that lemon juice before you swallow it. Everyone open up their eyes. How many of you had the reaction to start salivating like you just ate a lemon? How many? Okay, so a few. All right. When we do visualization really well and we incorporate all of our senses, our brain actually can't tell the difference between what is real, what is physically happening, and what we're imagining. So our body actually has the same reaction. We cannot distinguish the two. The other reason why it's really important is that it can create connections within our brain. So we talk about, or there's the rule of the 10,000 hours to master a skill. Well, that doesn't mean you have to do 10,000 hours physically. In fact, what they're finding is that skills that are done both mentally and physically are better learned than those ones that are just done physically. So visualization is actually adds on to the mastery of a skill. If I'm getting, all right. So we're going to kind of go through those questions, the why, the how, the when today. Just once again, as kind of a basic intro to visualization. And I think someone had said it at the beginning. So firstly, when working with athletes, I always try to bring it back to the mental being the exact same as the physical. We physically warm up before practice. Very rarely would a coach start a practice without doing any kind of warm up physically. Okay. The same thing needs to go for the mental side. If we want our athletes to be completely engaged in what they're doing, they need to do a mental warm up. So taking some time in the warm up or even before the physical warm up to bring them into whatever the sport is and whatever you're going to be doing that day, kind of giving them an outlook of what is going to be happening that day and giving them the opportunity to get their brains around what they're going to be doing in practice or what you're expecting as a coach for them to get out of that practice. Just like I had said earlier, when we can't do it physically, it can be the equivalent. Our brains cannot tell the difference, especially when we are doing visualization very well. So it's very important when dealing with injury. And in fact, this is one of the things we use most as mental performance consultants to help athletes deal with injury and to continue to work on their sport while dealing with injury. But also specifically in this particular situation where a lot of athletes can't practice physically. They can train in some ways, but to practice specific skills for specific sports, a lot of them cannot do that, as I'm sure you can all attest to. So it's actually really good in this type of situation. And we'll talk about some exercises that you can have them do during this time. Otherwise, it can help to rewire or to wire the brain. So if we are learning a new skill, it's really good with helping wire the brain in the correct way. So once again, making those correct connections, those correct synapses within the brain. But if we have constantly made that same mistake, our brain has actually created that connection, and that connection is getting stronger every time I make that mistake. So I need to almost unwire myself and rewire it to do it correctly. So one of the ways in which you can do that is to go back through it as a visualization. So to take the time within practice, and you will see it obviously as with an athlete who's constantly doing the same thing, and no matter what way you're giving the correction, they're just unable to make that adjustment. So taking the time to actually go through a visualization and giving them the time to go through that visualization can help rewire that. Also helps with confidence and overcoming fear. And the reason why that is that once again, it increases our experience. Because our brain cannot distinguish, or because our body cannot distinguish whether we actually did it or didn't, if I'm upping my experience in doing something, I'm inevitably upping my confidence. So if we take away this part of kind of that graph and we just look at most athletes' experience would be around here. If I'm upping my experience, I'm becoming more of a master at that skill. And I can up my experience through visualization. So the how-to. And how many of you have done this as an individual or as an athlete? And okay. Thumbs up. All right, quite a few. Depends on how comfortable you are. Oh, here we're getting a couple here. Sorry. Never really good at it. Yeah, it's one of those things too, that it takes practice. All mental skills, they're one of those things that people like to use in competition settings, but don't get enough practice at them before they actually use them in competition. So one of the things in takeaways from today is that this is a really good opportunity to start practicing a basic skill like visualization, so that it isn't just being used in a competition setting. But yeah, it is 100%. Takes a lot of practice. I know as an athlete, it took a long time for me to actually start being able to visualize myself doing the right things, because I constantly visualized to myself making mistakes at the beginning. So it is something that it does take a lot of practice. So finding a really comfortable position, so whether it's sitting or lying down in a comfortable place, but where you won't be interrupted. And sometimes athletes don't have that possibility because they're either on a really noisy pool deck or they're out on a field and there's not a place to go. One thing I tell the athletes I work with is to put on earphones or headphones. It kind of gives the signal to other people that you're in your own space and you're doing your own thing, especially if you actually close your eyes while putting them on. So if you can't find a comfortable space where you won't be interrupted, as kind of a precautionary measure, get them to have most of them have them anyway, but to use their earphones. That doesn't necessarily mean that they need to listen to guided imagery or that they need to listen to any kind of music, but just to put it in as a signal to others to kind of let them have their space. Now, visualization goes hand in hand with breathing exercises. I wouldn't really recommend doing visualization on its own for the first time without incorporating breathing exercises beforehand. And the reason why is that the breathing exercise is kind of used as a way to kind of give our brain that blank slate. Going into a visualization, from whether it's from a day going into a practice, whether it's within a practice trying to work on a skill, we have lots of thoughts that are going on in our brain, and it's often difficult to quiet them down and to focus on something specific without going through the quieting down part of it. So the breathing exercise helps us create that blank slate. So if you would think all of our thoughts are written on this chalkboard, taking this breathing exercise just basically allows us to wipe that slate clean. So breathing exercise, as some of you may know, or most of you may know, is we would want you to do circular breathing. So in through the nose and out through the mouth. And on the inhale, that you would be inflating your lungs, so inflating your belly. And on the exhale, you would be deflating your belly. And you would probably do 3 to 5 breaths before starting a visualization. And with those breaths, you would be counting on the inhale and counting on the exhale. So counting, let's say, for 4 on the inhale and counting to 8 on the exhale. Or some people like to do square breathing, so counting in for 4, holding for 4, out for 4, and hold for 4. Whatever breathing exercise works for them, or whatever they're used to, that's the one that you want them to do. It doesn't need to be specifically one kind of breathing. It does need to be in through the nose, because that kind of engages our parasympathetic nervous system, and out through the mouth. In addition, when we are counting and breathing, our thoughts are kind of slightly washed away, in the sense that we're just focusing on counting. And that allows us to start to direct our attention to whatever it is that we're going to start visualizing. Second thing is to create the scene. So gonna throw that out again to all of you. What are some of the things in your field of play that you would want to an athlete, or that you as a coach would guide your athletes through in incorporating, in just kind of creating that scene of your field of play? And I think Mohit had, and correct me if I'm pronouncing it improperly, you had talked about the lights. Lighting is a big thing. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with hockey players, and the lighting and the ice is a big thing that they like to talk about in hockey. The venue, the fans, the forecast. Yeah. The soccer fields, the goal lines, the balls. Aerial view, what is in the locker room, so walking out onto the court. The smell of the chlorine, yep. What kind of smells? The feel of the ball on your foot, great. The view and smell and background noise.
Yeah, Danielle, I think one more thing we focus on is the in and out of the facility areas, like the emergency exits, and where they come in, and where will be the ambulances will be, and all those stuff, right?
Okay, yeah, good. The lane, the finish line, wind, waves, distance of race, yep. Visualize the lane, great. A specific moment in the game, awesome. And to see themselves. And so some of them are mentioned in aerial view, so where you would see yourself. And then sometimes we visualize as ourselves, so what we would see in these particular situations. And it's good to do both. One isn't better than the other. So I get asked that a lot. Using all 5 senses. The smell of cut grass, great, yeah. The background noise, yeah. And it's good because a lot of you guys have used different senses, so that's great. Just want to make sure. Oh, so the white water and the feature wave. And the reactions of situations, yes, very important. And parents cheering in the crowd, hitting a winner to end a point. Yeah, and the feeling associated with that. Good. So yeah, so creating that scene really does set the stage. And something as a coach to start really helps the athlete be able to complete a visualization, especially if an athlete is new to visualizing. Sometimes that creativity doesn't come naturally. So having athletes, and we'll talk once again a little bit later about how this can be done in this particular situation, but really creating that and using their five senses. But you as the coach, especially because you know the pools, you know the ice, you know the field, you know the court, better than a lot of them, so that you can incorporate, and then you can ask them to help create that scene as well. So ask them what you're missing in creating that scene. So all of you did a great job at mentioning using all five senses. The reason behind that is because, once again, coming back to the brain not being able to distinguish the physical from the imaginary. If my imaginary is only including one sense, my brain isn't going to get tricked very well. If I'm using all of my senses in creating that image, my brain is more likely to be tricked. So, for instance, when we talked about the lemon, I didn't do a great job of using all five senses. I think I did maybe 2 or 3. But if I had gone on more elaborately about that, our brains, and we had really started to incorporate that into that image, our brains wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. So it's really important that you yourself as a coach get them to incorporate, or you help them incorporate them. So if they can't think of, oh, I don't know what that tastes like. Well, chlorine, what's that taste like? Sweat, what does that taste like? The air sometimes on an ice rink tastes different. Your mouth guard. So have some of these kind of ideas for them to use in their imagery. And then you want to connect with feelings. And this was something else that I saw quite a few of you putting in the chat box. You want the feelings to drive these images. So it's great to include all the five senses. It's great to have a really vivid image, but it's not going to have the same power if you don't have feelings associated with it. So really talk about, what does that feel like when you touch the end of the pool, when you cross that finish line, when you score a goal, when you're down a point, when you're down a few points, when you're losing. What does that feel like? And what do you need to kind of dig deeper into yourself to be able to bring out that positive reaction, or that reaction that's going to move you in a way that gets that next goal, or that makes you faster? And so, kind of on that, we don't want to just visualize perfect scenarios. We want to visualize challenging circumstances. We want to visualize when we're down points. We want to visualize when someone is ahead of us. We want to visualize when we have to go up a really steep hill. These things are going to come up. We want to visualize bad ice conditions, bad hot weather, rain. We want all of these things because it allows us to get prepared for them. And then our reaction is a lot faster when we actually encounter them in real life, because we've already encountered them and we've already planned out how we're going to react to them. So it's as much as important to have challenging situations as it is to visualize yourself doing a specific skill perfectly. On the other end, though, the things that we can control, like our skill execution, we do want that to go well every time. That is a controllable. That is completely within our control, how we execute. So if we are visualizing and somehow we visualize us making a mistake, that's when you want your athlete to stop. Open their eyes, take a breath, and to start again. Because what we don't want is them to go through that entire visualization making a mistake or executing improperly, I should say, and making that connection stronger in their brain, which is why they may be doing it wrong in the first place, because they may be incapable of visualizing themselves executing it correctly because they haven't been able to do it physically correctly. And that connection is already strong in their brain. So now talking a little bit about when to use visualization. Like I said at the beginning, important to use it before practice or as part of your warm-up. Often with working with athletes, I know coaches don't always have the time to have that as part of the warm-up. So what I typically ask my athletes to do is to take the time in the car to get to practice to do their mental warm-up. However, as a coach, if you're showing that this is important to you, it's teaching the athlete that this is something that needs to be regularly done, and therefore at a competition, it's just practice. It's just something that they practice, and it's something that they know. It's not something novel to them. And not sometimes, when we are doing something completely new or only in competition, that can just actually increase our nerves. So if I'm only using visualization in competition settings, I may in fact just be increasing their nerves because they're associating visualization with competition, and that's it. They're not associating it with learning a skill and helping them in their skill acquisition. So yeah, 5 minutes, and it might just be you talking to them about what your goals are for that practice, and then or it might be talking about what drills and skills you're going to be working on, and them taking the time to just kind of go through those drills or skills before the practice starts or before you start doing your physical warm-up. It could be guided, so you could do it as a team. It could be self-directed. You could depending on if you're a team sport, an individual sport, obviously, you could let athletes do their own. But once again, getting into visualization is something that it's important as a coach to just help your athletes with it, especially because sometimes that creativity around those 5 senses isn't always there. Sorry, I'm just gonna, okay. Another time to use visualization is when you see an athlete struggling or getting really frustrated. Or if they're trying to learn, so they're trying to learn a new skill and they just can't get it. I see this often in gymnastics because some of those skills are so difficult to get on their first try, and there's a lot of fear sometimes involved with if they don't execute a skill correctly simply because of a fear of injury. Same thing with sometimes in snowboarding as well. But when learning a new skill, especially when there's a fear of injury involved, it's important that you start it with a visualization. So once again, it doesn't necessarily need to be the kind where you get the athlete to close their eyes and they do the breathing technique. At that point, it may be you just walking them through it kinesthetically. And so talking exactly about each part of the body and where that goes and how something might feel on, like the stick might feel in their hands, how the skates might feel on their feet, how it feels with the ball, all of those things that you want to really talk about those feelings, sorry, those senses as well as the feeling. Coming back from injury, also really important. We see athletes come back from injury and they have the expectations that they're going to come back and they're going to be back to where they were within a week or two. And what does that usually lead to? What do we see a lot of time happening when athletes come back and they have that expectation that they're going to be able to come right back to where they were? What tends to happen in that situation? Re-injury, yes. Thank you, Dina. Yes, re-injury. I can't tell you how many times, and even just on a call earlier this week, 2 athletes, they came back from a concussion and within a week they were concussed again. It's important that when we're coming back from injury, and in this particular situation, when we're coming back to play, that there are steps, the expectations around being able to do what we were doing right before this happened, or be doing what you were doing before you had an injury, is mitigated. So that, okay, first week, these are the expectations. Second week, these are expectations. And to help that in using visualization throughout. So, okay, so I'm visualizing, these are the skills that I'm going to be working on in that first week, and kind of the steps throughout, so that people aren't going straight to doing all those hard skills and expecting to have the same kind of execution. And then making the same mistake. Once again, it's often that you see athletes make a mistake repetitively and they actually can't change it. No matter what you as a coach are giving to them as feedback, they have a real difficulty making that change. Visualization would be really important in that particular situation, but even more so, having a video of what they're doing. So this is really important because in their own mind, they're visualizing themselves doing it in a certain way, and that actually isn't well connected with what they're doing in reality. A video actually can help build on that visualization, because what they can now change in their visualization, let's say they're trying to have a straight vertical line and they're constantly arched. Well, what they can do is, now that they've seen the video and that they've seen they're constantly arched, they can adjust that visualization to almost feel like they're before a vertical line. So they're making that adjustment within their visualization, and we may see that change happen in their execution. Can you give your team or individual players too much visualization? You don't need to give them, you don't need to spend an inordinate amount of time on it. I don't think, I've never heard of too much, but you could probably get it to be to the point where they are overthinking. Visualization shouldn't really last longer than 5 minutes, and that should incorporate that breathing exercise that we talked about. If you're going on it for a long period of time, unless you're actually visualizing a race and going through, let's say I'm racing, I don't know, a 400 meter, and I want to actually race my race plan mentally. No, that might not take longer than 5 minutes anymore. It depends on how fast you are. But there are certain things that take longer than 5 minutes. But I would, as like kind of as a good marker, 5 minutes really is all you need to do. And you should be doing that on a daily basis. More than that, I don't know if that actually is much use. But I don't know if it would go against you. But that's a very good question. What about a player who's afraid of making a soccer tackle, run towards a player, but then slows down or jumps to the side? Yeah, so Sherry, in that particular situation, you almost want to kind of over exaggerate what they need to do in that particular situation. So even almost like thinking of going through the player versus just going to get that particular going towards them. You want to might think about going through them. And as far as them slowing down or jumps to the side, what that would feel like when they do it correctly. What that should feel like. Would showing a mistake or wrong technique reinforce that mistake? No, and it wouldn't unless they keep going, unless you keep going over it, but it allows them to adjust. So what I would do is I would show it and then get them to adjust what their visualization is. Okay, so show the video, give them the time to actually visualize before they do it again versus just watch it and then go right away, depending on how much time you have. How about showing another athlete perform that skills correctly? Yes, that too. Although sometimes it is difficult, I forget which sport you're in, but sometimes just because of body composition okay. So yeah, just how they're built might be different. So it might not be as applicable, even though the skill execution itself is there. Can I also show a video of themselves, someone else doing it well correctly for you? Yes, so you can do it, but once again, keep in mind that the physically we're different. So sometimes when we see that done by somebody else, we have a hard time actually seeing that be us. So when you do show somebody else, get them to actually visualize that it's themselves. And I've used that before. So I've had athletes look at Olympic athletes, and when they're looking at them, to visualize that that's their face versus whomever they're looking at. Okay, and to embody that person. So I've used that in their visualization, not necessarily in a video, but to think about a particular role model or idol that they have within their sport and to be that person in their own visualization. Should visualization be done with eyes closed, and is there pros and cons for doing visualization in group versus by yourself in a room? Eyes closed are good in the situation where you're not actually in the venue. And if there are a lot of distractions. So if you have athletes, which are, I would say, the majority of adolescent athletes, that get distracted very easily, it's better that their eyes are closed, just simply to diminish distraction. And as far as group versus individual, both are good. It depends on what sport. Group is good because as far as team sports go, people are using kind of those same cues. The communication is there. It helps with kind of that team unity because everyone feels like they're going through the same thing together. But individuals, definitely, it would be, for as far as individual sports go, it would be better that you also allow them to do it on an individual basis because individuals need different cues as far as individual sports go. You mentioned 5 minutes. What do you think about a 15-minute guided visualization as a team? And this is hockey? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs to be done all the time, but I guess it would depend on what you're doing in that time. If the actual skill that you're practicing takes a specific amount of time, or a play that you're practicing takes a specific amount of time, then yeah, that would be fine.
Can I speak rather than write?
Yeah.
We've done like once a week. We'll show them like about 10 or 15 minutes of video clips, all positive, and then we have them go through. And I don't use it; I just use a tape, and they go through a guided visualization. Is that too long? I guess that's my question, really.
Is the visualization also meditation though?
Yes, kind
Okay,
of. Yeah.
then yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I'm
I
just
wonder
talking
if
about it's the focused attention of visualizing a skill or executing something over a long period of time.
yeah,
When you include meditation in that and the breathing exercise, which
yeah.
usually is kind of like the meat of that kind of time, then that's a different story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if it's too long.
No, that's
I could
great.
have one more quick question.
Yep.
How about like when we do it as a group? We have some kids that are restless. I always tell them like if you don't want to do it, fine, just don't bother anybody else. But is there anything that you can suggest to get them to try it?
Yeah, I mean,
work hard on selling them on it, but
yeah, it's really getting that buy-in. It's getting that buy-in and the why behind it. So if they're not bought into the why, then it's going to be hard. And also it just might be maturity. Like you're going to struggle with certain age groups for sure. And some of the mental skills just take a certain age to be able to really wrap their head around it.
Well, I've coached men and kids, and I've struggled with both groups. So.
Fair enough. Yeah, and yeah, listening to music is a good one. But there are guided meditations, and one of the resources I'll share at the end here is exactly that. At what point would you say is an athlete able to visualize, have some talk? At what point would you say an athlete is able to self-visualize? Okay, versus having some. They'll know that, Bruce. They should be able to tell you that. Whether they're being truthful or not, I guess that would just depend on your relationship with the athlete. But really, an athlete kind of knows, you know what? Okay, what you're saying was a help, but now I need to make it my own. And at some point, they do need to do that. Yeah, so you sell it by telling them the pros, then do it all the time and it works. Yeah. And once again, it's just making it part of your practice. If it's not part of your practice, it's going to be hard to sell in times of stress. Yeah, there has to be buy-in for sure. Okay. So when to do it? Before competition, the night before. The night before is really helpful for athletes being able to fall asleep. Once again, this is when we would see the visualization being paired with a breathing exercise. Because what happens the night before a competition? Athletes go down the what if rabbit hole. And what if this happens? What if that happens? When you do a visualization, you answer the what ifs. And you create the reaction that you're going to have in those situations. So anytime your brain, that self-talk is going, oh, well, what if it's raining and the field is all muddy? Then I'm already going through that particular situation in a visualization. So night before, we often see our athletes not get a good sleep because they're up thinking about the competition or the tournament. Get them to do it before they go to bed. And at this point, that's when I would definitely pair it with a longer breathing exercise and a very short visualization exercise. The morning of, once again, it would just almost be like reviewing for an exam. So you're not doing anything elaborate here. It would just be a very short visualization. And I put 1 hour before, but depending on the logistics of your sport and competitions, that can be anywhere from 5 minutes before to 2 hours before. But there should be some kind of visualization in there. And it doesn't need to be super formal. It doesn't need to necessarily include the breathing exercise there, but it should be one where you have your eyes closed and you definitely are in a spot where you can just focus on yourself. All right. And then now is a great time to be working on mental skills because we don't have the capacity to work on a lot of our physical skills. So I would challenge all of you as coaches, when you meet with them on Zoom or however you're meeting with them, that you take them to your field of play, to your pool, to your hockey rink, to your field, to your basketball court, okay? And that you, once again, incorporate what you typically see, smell, hear, feel when you go in there, or how that's going to feel for them when they get back in there. So once again, it's associating those feelings as well. And I can guarantee that they're going to feel really happy, that's going to feel positive emotions for them. So to take them into that field of play, incorporate them into like the details of that as well. So pick out a few athletes to give some of those senses of what they have. And it's almost, it becomes a fun game where they're like, oh yeah, it does smell like dirty socks in that locker room. Or yeah, the chlorine is really pungent on your nose. So there's different things that you can get them really involved in. And it's really good because it elicits that memory and those positive feelings. And a lot of athletes could use that right now. So associate the feeling of starting a practice. So what would happen at the beginning of your practice? Walk them through that. And like I said, ask them what they see, smell, hear, taste, and feel. And then get them to actually practice a specific skill. And whether you want to guide them through that or let them do it on their own, or both. We certainly have the time right now to do it, but it would be a good practice to start now before we actually get back onto field of play. Something that I've been finding really useful during this time, and it's kind of like a good way to lead into visualization, is for them to actually pull out old pictures and pull, or videos of them having their proudest moment, of them having great teamwork, of them having a really funny moment. Because when they do that, and it becomes almost like a show and tell, and they're describing it to their group, they're using the same skills that they need for visualization, but it's all right there. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet. So it gets them used to incorporating all those senses without having to do it all on their own, or without them having to listen or rely on you. In addition, it elicits positive memories. And right now, we're so keen to think the negative, because there seems to be a lot of negative going on right now, and our brains being more negative than they are positive. We're 70 to 80% of our thoughts being negative. It's really nice for the brain to take that positive break, and so to remember some of those positives that have occurred in the past. In addition, it kind of brings back that memory of why they enjoy the sport in the first place. Other thing just to kind of remember is that 90% of what our brain absorbs is visual. Hence why I like to always use a lot of visuals in my PowerPoints. I'm a big visual learner. I like visuals, and it's important that you as coaches try to incorporate as much visuals. So whether, once again, going back to those that we're talking about, showing other athletes, this would also be a good time to show execution done perfectly well, but also then invite them to visualize that being them, or to visualize this individual going through those motions, but with them as the body and the face. The last thing, and if you guys know who this little guy is, then you already know about Headspace. I have no ties to Headspace, but I always ask my athletes to get it, because it is a really great and free resource. I think it's still free as far as the basic version goes, and it's called guided meditation. And I know a lot of athletes kind of shy away from the word meditation. but it does take you into visualization, and it does walk you through those breathing exercises, and certainly useful for right now, and getting practice in it and using it on a daily basis, and then taking that into their training when they start back up again. And that is it. Wow. That went fast.
Awesome.
Any
Thanks, Danielle.
Comments or things that you want me to go back to?
May I ask another question?
Just a second. I'm just going to answer Teresa's because she got in here before you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries. I mentioned to my athletes as soon as possible. Yes, it also decreases nerves. Oh wait, I'm getting a lot now. Kirsty.
Here, do you want me to read some of them aloud?
Yeah, if you want
Okay.
to read that top one, I could.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, they mentioned to their athletes that as soon as possible that they can practice mentally until they get back into the gym, and share with them that the brain can't tell. Some said they don't have time, so I told them to do it a couple minutes while laying in bed at night. I tried suggesting some meditation before bed to some of my athletes that were struggling with skills before the cover hit.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks. And Joseph, for kids under 12, good question. It's really bringing it back to kind of getting them to answer the questions about the physical and mental. And one thing that I always, when first teaching mental skills to athletes, I under 12 is difficult, but when looking at 12, 13, 14, something I often do is get them to tell me what they need, what they do to physically warm up, what physical flexibility they need, what physical strength they need, what physical endurance they need. And so they're conceptualizing the physicality of it, but then I get them to start to think on the mental side. Well, what does mental flexibility mean in your sport? What does mental strength mean in your sport? What does mental power mean in your sport? And so when they start to understand those concepts, just like the physical, it's easier for them to grab a hold of some of this type of stuff. But if they can't get that concept, it's hard for you to teach them, because if they don't have that buy-in or that why or that understanding, it doesn't have any meaning to them. Although you could always bring in some really great athlete that they all look up to, and that person tell them to do it, and they'll be likely to do it. So it's always useful to have somebody other than yourself tell them to do it. What age? Yeah, I would say around 12, 13 it is a good age. But also depends on the maturity of the athlete.
And then, Enyo, did you want to open your mic to ask your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
In your opinion, what's it better to teach them? To see it from their own eyes, or to
both?
Both?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
Yeah, one isn't better than the other, but it's important that they're able to kind of go between the two.
Yeah, but one isn't better than the other. Like there's no.
No, it's just them having kind of that ability, and whatever they naturally would do is great, but it is important that they can learn to do both.
And thank you, that was excellent.
No, thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Danielle. Can I add one little piece?
Mm-hmm.
I have one friend who they don't see visuals in their head. And like very, very intelligent person, and like, you know, gets along quite fine with everything else in life. But when I was talking to them about this, they're like, no, I do not have pictures in my head. So that really blew my mind, because I'm a really visual person in my head. So something I just thought to add at the end here is just, you know, maybe before you start, even like almost poll your team of like, who has no visuals in their head, just even that is a possibility. What I've found once or twice just asking a team, is that it's almost like 10% of people are like, I don't see anything, like nothing. But it's not that they can't mentally rehearse, right? It's just that they mentally rehearse in a different way, right? They prepare themselves for exams, they prepare themselves for conversations and things that they want to do. They just don't necessarily see the pictures the way someone else does, or maybe those pictures are really almost like fuzzy for them. So just as,
and like kinesthetically, then that would be a really good one to use then to get them to walk through something. For sure. No, I hadn't encountered that. That's interesting. And yeah, I'll make my slides available too.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll be following up from this presentation with an email, and I'll add the link to Headspace in there as well, and then I'll include Danielle's slides so that everyone can review the information. And this will be posted on YouTube as well, so if you want to go back and watch. And we'll just make the last call for any questions. So feel free to open your mic or write in the chat box.
Thanks, guys.
I really wish COVID-19 is just done with, because I want to go to Nova Scotia and meet all of you guys at once.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. Well, once this clears.
I know.
That's great. And I have athletes visualize them playing the entire game while they're out. That's a really good point that I didn't bring up. Good one.
Yeah.
I used to go through the motions physically. I try to do this. Yep, that works, Teresa.
We don't have skeleton in Halifax, though, Charles. So. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
I think
appreciate you
that's
guys taking your time today, especially for those that are getting the really nice weather and that you came in and sat down and learned, improved on yourselves as coaches. It's great. You guys do so much as it is. It's nice to see so many coaches constantly improving themselves and having that growth mindset. So kudos to all of you.
Yeah, there's one good news too. From my side, they have decided to promote me to head coach for table tennis.
Congratulations.
That's great. Congrats. And yeah, just to echo what Danielle was saying, thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you for those who have been coming out to almost every single one of these, which is so great to see. And just a friendly reminder, I'll be including this all in an email, but our next sessions, we have 3 next week, and we will be having 3 for the next few weeks up until, well, the duration is isolation, but we do have sessions booked for up until mid-June. So our next session is Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. So that'll be another nutrition session. And then we have another one Wednesday morning about leadership, and then Thursday afternoon about how to engage your athletes during this time. So I know we just had a similar session last night, but we're hoping to get that from a variety of coaches, just to get to see what other coaches are doing during this time and how they're engaging and motivating their athletes. So thank you everyone for coming today, and we hope to see you next week as well. And thank you, Danielle, for an awesome presentation. This is great and a lot of valuable information that will definitely help coaches. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon.